Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty watching the stars through the main screen when his communications officer, Ryan Blake, suddenly turned around with wide eyes and said, "Captain, we have an unknown vessel approaching from Sector 7, and it does not match any known human design." Jake felt his heart beat faster as he moved to the command chair and asked Ryan to put the ship on yellow alert while he studied the readings on his screen, showing a massive vessel that seemed to be made of some kind of crystal material that reflected light in strange patterns. The alien ship was 3 times larger than the Liberty and had no visible weapons, but Jake knew that meant nothing when dealing with unknown technology, so he ordered his crew to maintain safe distance while attempting communication. Ryan worked at his console trying different frequencies and protocols while Dr. Amy Chun, the ship's xenobiologist, hurried to the bridge to study the first readings of truly alien technology that humanity had ever encountered. After 20 minutes of failed attempts at communication, the alien vessel suddenly began transmitting on multiple frequencies at once, and Ryan managed to isolate what seemed like a response to their hails. The transmission contained complex mathematical sequences followed by what could only be attempts at language, but the sounds were unlike anything in human experience, with harmonics that seemed to vibrate through the ship hull itself. Jake made the decision that would change everything for both species when he ordered Ryan to respond with the same mathematical sequences, followed by basic human greetings in multiple Earth languages. The alien ship immediately responded by moving closer and projecting a holographic display that showed geometric patterns shifting into what looked like star maps, and then images of beings that appeared vaguely humanoid but with skin that glowed with soft blue light. Dr. Amy Chun gasped as she recognized that the aliens were showing them their home system and what appeared to be peaceful intentions through the universal language of mathematics and star charts. Jake felt a mix of excitement and terror, knowing that this moment would be remembered forever as humanity first contact with an intelligent alien species, but he also knew that everything they did in the next few hours could determine whether this meeting would lead to friendship or war. The alien vessel began transmitting more complex images showing their own crew, and Jake realized they wanted a face-to-face meeting. He consulted quickly with his senior staff, including Chief Engineer Sam Rodriguez, who assured him that the Liberty shields and weapons were ready if needed, while Dr. Amy Chun practically begged him to accept the meeting, saying this was the greatest opportunity in human history. Jake authorized the meeting, but insisted it take place in the Liberty main cargo bay, which could be sealed off from the rest of the ship if things went wrong. Both ships moved to a safe distance from each other, and Jake watched as a small crystalline shuttle detached from the alien vessel and approached their landing bay with grace that suggested technology far beyond human capabilities. When the alien shuttle landed, Jake led a small team, including Dr. Amy Chun and Ryan Blake, to greet their visitors while keeping armed security nearby but hidden. The shuttle door opened with a sound like musical chimes, and 3 figures emerged that took Jake's breath away with their otherworldly beauty and obvious intelligence. The leader was clearly female and stood nearly 6 feet tall with skin that shifted between blue and silver patterns, while her large eyes held intelligence that seemed ancient and wise. She wore what appeared to be living armor that pulsed gently with the same patterns as her skin, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that Jake felt in his chest as much as heard with his ears. She spoke in their musical language while gesturing toward herself and her companions, and Dr. Amy Chun frantically worked with her translation equipment to make sense of the complex communication that seemed to include emotional undertones that human language could not capture. After several attempts, the alien leader seemed to understand the problem and began speaking more slowly while pointing to herself and saying something that sounded like Lyra. Jake realized she was giving them her name, so he pointed to himself and clearly said Jake, then pointed to his companions and gave their names as well. The alien, who called herself Lyra, seemed pleased and repeated their names with surprisingly good pronunciation considering the differences in their vocal structures. Over the next hour, they managed to establish basic communication using a combination of gestures, mathematical concepts, and the few words they had learned from each other. Lyra indicated that she was a leader among her people and that they called themselves something that translated roughly to the people of Crystal Light, or Zalarians as Dr. Amy Chun decided to call them in her notes. Jake learned that the Zalarians had been traveling the stars for thousands of years, but had never encountered another species with space travel capabilities and advanced mathematics like humans possessed. Lyra seemed fascinated by human diversity and kept asking through gestures about the different skin colors and features of Jake crew members, which made him realize that Zalarians might all look very similar to each other. The meeting continued for hours as both sides shared basic information about their species, and Jake found himself impressed by Lyra's intelligence and obvious diplomatic training. She never seemed threatening despite the clear technological advantages her people possessed, and instead showed curiosity about human culture and society that reminded Jake of a scholar rather than a military leader. When Lyra's companions began showing signs of fatigue, Jake offered to end the meeting, but Lyra gestured that she wanted to continue and asked through their crude translation system if she could return tomorrow to learn more about humans. Jake agreed readily, knowing that this extended contact could lead to the greatest advancement in human history if handled properly. As the Zalarian shuttle prepared to leave, Lyra approached Jake directly and spoke a single word in accented but clear English, "Thank you," which told him that she had been learning their language during the entire meeting. Jake smiled and replied in his best attempt at Zalarian, "Thank you, crystal friend," which made Lyra's skin patterns shift to what he somehow knew was her equivalent of a smile. After the aliens departed, Jake called an emergency meeting with his senior staff to discuss what they had learned and plan for continued contact. Dr. Amy Chen was practically vibrating with excitement about the scientific opportunities, while engineer Sam Rodriguez expressed concern about the energy readings he had detected from the alien technology that seemed to operate on principles human science did not understand. Jake made the decision to remain in the area and continue meetings with Princess Lyra, as he now knew she was called, while sending a message to Earth Command about the historic contact. He knew that everything would change for humanity, but looking at the star where the Zalarian ship waited, he felt hope rather than fear about the future they might build together. 3 weeks had passed since first contact, and Princess Lyra spent most of her time aboard the UES Liberty learning about human culture with an eagerness that amazed Jake and his crew. Every morning she would arrive in her small shuttle accompanied by only one guard, which Dr. Amy Chun explained showed incredible trust, since Zalarians were naturally cautious beings who rarely traveled without full military protection. Jake found himself looking forward to their daily meetings more than he cared to admit, as Lyra's quick mind and genuine curiosity about human customs made every conversation fascinating. She had learned enough English to communicate without translation equipment, though she still occasionally slipped into Zalarian when emotions made her skin patterns shift to colors that Jake was beginning to recognize as excitement or confusion. Dr. Amy Chun had become Lyra's closest human friend as they worked together to understand the biological and cultural differences between their species. During one of their sessions, Lyra revealed something that changed everything Jake thought he knew about her people when she explained that Zalarians were a dying race facing extinction within a few generations unless they could find a solution to their reproduction crisis. Lyra explained that centuries of genetic manipulation and selective breeding had made her people too similar to each other, and their birth rates had dropped to almost nothing over the past 50 years. The few children that were born often died young from genetic defects that their scientists could not prevent or cure despite their advanced medical technology. She told them that Zalarian reproduction required not just physical compatibility but something they called soul resonance, which was a deep emotional and mental connection between partners that allowed their genetic material to combine successfully. The problem was that all modern Zalarians had become so genetically identical that they could no longer achieve the resonance needed for healthy offspring. Jake listened with growing understanding as Lyra described how their scientists had theorized that contact with another intelligent species might provide the genetic diversity needed to restore their reproductive capabilities. She admitted that her diplomatic mission was partly a desperate search for biological salvation for her entire civilization. The revelation explained why Lyra spent so much time studying human emotional responses and social interactions, which were far more complex and varied than anything Zellerians experienced. Dr. Amy Chun medical scans had shown surprising similarities between human and Zellerian biology, particularly in their brain structures and certain genetic sequences that suggested some distant evolutionary connection. Engineer Sam Rodriguez had been monitoring unusual energy readings whenever Jake and Lyra were in the same room, and his latest report showed a consistent pattern of bioelectric activity that seemed to create a resonance field between them. Sam explained that the readings were unlike anything in human science but appeared to be some kind of neural synchronization that occurred naturally without either person being aware of it. Jake found himself drawn to Lyra not just intellectually, but emotionally, as her passion for saving her people and her genuine interest in human culture created a bond that grew stronger with each passing day. He noticed that her skin patterns had begun showing new colors when she was around him, colors that her guard had quietly explained to. Dr. Amy Chun indicated deep affection and trust. Lyra began sharing more personal details about her life as heir to the Zellarian throne and the pressure she faced from her people council to find a solution to their genetic crisis before it was too late. She spoke of watching friends die young and seeing the despair in her people's eyes as they realized their ancient civilization might not survive another century. During their fourth week together, Lyra asked Jake to show her Earth music and literature, explaining that Zellarians had never developed art forms that expressed individual emotion the way humans did. Jake spent hours playing different musical styles and reading poetry, while Lyra listened with fascination to the way humans used creative expression to communicate feelings that could not be spoken directly. Breakthrough came when Jake played a recording of Earth children singing lullabies, and Lyra's skin patterns suddenly shifted to colors Sam had never seen before, while tears that sparkled like liquid crystal flowed down her face. She explained that Zellarian children had not sung in over a generation, and hearing human young voices filled with joy and innocence made her realize how much her people had lost that evening. Lyra asked Jake to walk with her in the Liberty observation deck where they could see the stars together. As they stood looking out at the galaxy, Lyra told him that being around humans, especially him, made her feel emotions she had never experienced, and that the resonance her scientists had theorized about was not just genetic but spiritual as well. Jake felt his own emotions stirring as he realized that his feelings for Lyra had grown far beyond diplomatic friendship into something deeper and more meaningful than any relationship he had ever experienced. When she placed her hand on his arm, her skin patterns shifted to warm gold colors that somehow made him feel peaceful and complete in a way that human contact had never achieved. They began spending their evenings together, walking through the ship, or sitting in comfortable silence while Lyra learned to appreciate human customs like shared meals and casual conversation. Jake taught her card games and showed her pictures of Earth while she shared stories of Zellarian history and the beautiful crystal cities of her home world. Dr. Amy Chun noticed that both Jake and Lyra seemed more relaxed and happy during this period, and her medical scans showed that the bioelectric resonance Sam had detected was growing stronger and more complex. She began to suspect that something unprecedented was developing between the two beings from different worlds. Meanwhile, communications with both Earth Command and the Zellarian High Council were becoming more tense as hardliners on both sides expressed concern about the extended contact. Admiral Kate Sullivan sent increasingly urgent messages demanding that Jake follow proper first contact protocols, while General Vex Thorne, Lyra military advisor, warned her about spending too much time with aliens who might contaminate Zellarian purity. Lyra confided to Jake that her people council was growing impatient with her mission and expected her to return soon with concrete solutions to their genetic crisis. She admitted that she had found something even more valuable than she had hoped for, but was afraid to tell her people because they might not understand the emotional connection that was developing between them. Jake realized that their time together was limited and that soon political pressure would force them apart unless something changed dramatically. As he watched Lyra work with Dr. Amy Chun on biological compatibility studies, he began to hope that maybe science would provide the answer that would let them continue their relationship. The night before Lyra was scheduled to report back to her Consul Jake asked her to meet him privately in his quarters. As they sat together sharing human tea that she had learned to enjoy, Lyra suddenly placed her hand over his and told him that the sole resonance her people needed for reproduction was something she felt every time they were together. Jake looked into her large, expressive eyes and saw not just alien beauty but intelligence, compassion, and growing love that transcended the differences between their species. When he told her that he cared for her more than any human woman he had ever known, her skin patterns exploded into brilliant rainbow colors that filled his quarters with soft light. They spent that night talking about possibilities and dreams while the energy readings in SAM instruments went completely off scale as two beings from different worlds discovered that love truly was universal. 3 months had passed since that night when Jake and Lyra first admitted their feelings for each other, and the relationship between the human captain and Zilarian princess had deepened into something neither species had thought possible. They spent every available moment together, sharing meals, walking through the ship, and learning about each other's cultures, while the crew of both vessels watched with mixtures of fascination and concern. Amy Chun had become increasingly excited about her biological research as her scans continued to show unprecedented compatibility between Jake and Lyra at the cellular level. Engineer Sam Rodriguez reported that the bioelectric resonance between them had stabilized into patterns that seemed to indicate some kind of permanent neural bonding that his instruments could measure but not fully explain. Jake knew that their relationship was causing political problems as messages from Earth Command became more demanding, and Admiral Kate Sullivan threatened to relieve him of command if he did not follow proper first contact protocols. Similarly, Lyra faced increasing pressure from General Vex Thorne, who argued that her extended stay with humans was compromising her duties as heir to the Zilarian throne. Despite the external pressures, Jake and Lyra continued to grow closer as they discovered that their different perspectives on life and culture complemented each other perfectly. Jake's admiration for Lyra's intelligence and dedication to her people matched her fascination with human emotional complexity and ability to form deep bonds across species barriers. The morning that changed everything began like any other, with Lyra arriving at the Liberty for her daily cultural exchange sessions with Dr. Amy Chun. However, Jake immediately noticed that something was different about her, as her skin patterns showed colors he had never seen before, bright silver and gold swirls that seemed to pulse with internal light. Lyra asked to speak privately with Jake and Dr. Amy Chun, which was unusual since she normally enjoyed including Ryan Blake and other crew members in their discussions. When they gathered in the conference room, Lyra seemed nervous for the first time since Jake had known her, as her hands trembled slightly and her skin patterns shifted rapidly through different color combinations. Amy Chun noticed Lyra's unusual behavior and asked if she was feeling well, which prompted Lyra to explain that Zilarian physiology showed emotional states through skin patterns that humans were only beginning to understand. She admitted that she was experiencing feelings that were completely new to her people and needed medical guidance to understand what was happening to her body. Jake felt worry growing in his chest as he wondered if their relationship had somehow harmed Lyra or caused some kind of biological reaction that might be dangerous. He asked directly if being around humans had made her sick, and was relieved when she quickly assured him that she felt healthier and more alive than ever before in her life. Amy Chun suggested running full medical scans to determine what was causing Lyra's unusual symptoms, and Lyra agreed, immediately saying that she trusted human medical technology and wanted to understand the changes in her body. As they made their way to the medical bay, Jake noticed that several crew members stopped their work to stare at Lyra's glowing skin patterns, which were now so bright they seemed to illuminate the corridor. The medical scans took several hours as Amy Chun used every piece of equipment available to analyze Zilarian physiology and compare the results to baseline readings taken during their first meetings. Jake waited anxiously outside the medical bay while Sam Rodriguez joined him to discuss the energy readings that had been growing stronger over the past few days. When Amy Chun finally emerged from the medical bay, her expression showed a mixture of amazement, disbelief, and scientific excitement that Jake had never seen before. She asked both Jake and Sam to join her in the medical bay immediately, while insisting that what she had discovered would change everything they thought they knew about both species inside. The medical bay Lyra sat on the examination table with skin patterns now showing steady silver and gold colors that created a gentle glow throughout the room. Dr. Amy Chun activated her display screens and showed scan results that Jake could not interpret but clearly indicated some kind of significant biological change in Lyra body. Dr. Amy Chen explained in careful scientific terms that Lyra was showing all the biological indicators of early pregnancy, despite the fact that human and Zellarian reproduction should have been completely impossible according to everything they knew about cross-species biology. She ran the scans multiple times to confirm the results while Jake felt the world spinning around him as he tried to process the implications. Lyra looked at Jake with eyes that sparkled with joy and pride as she confirmed what Dr. Amy Chun had discovered and explained that Zellarian females always knew immediately when conception occurred because their skin patterns changed to announce the blessed event to their entire community. She said that she had been hoping for this result but had not dared believe it was possible until the medical scans confirmed her body's natural responses. Jake sat down heavily as he realized that he was going to be a father to a child that represented something completely unprecedented in galactic history. The baby growing inside Lyra was not just their child but potentially the bridge between two species and the key to Zellarian survival that her people had been desperately seeking. Dr. Amy Chun continued her explanations about how the pregnancy appeared to be progressing normally despite the genetic differences between humans and Zellarians. She theorized that the neural resonance Sam had been measuring had somehow created the conditions necessary for successful cross-species reproduction in ways that current science could not explain. Lyra stood up and moved to Jake's side, taking his hands in hers while her skin patterns shifted to warm colors that filled the room with gentle light. She told him that in Zellarian culture pregnancy was always announced publicly, because children were precious gifts that belonged to the entire community and she wanted to share their joy with both crews. Immediately Jake felt overwhelming emotions of love, pride, and terror as he realized that their child would face challenges no being in the galaxy had ever experienced. The baby would be part human and part alien, growing up between two worlds and potentially carrying the hopes and fears of both species on its small shoulders. That afternoon, Lyra insisted on making the announcement during the regular diplomatic meeting that included senior officers from both ships. She stood before the assembled crowd with Jake at her side and spoke in clear English that had improved dramatically over their months together. She announced proudly that she was carrying Captain Jake Morrison's child and that this pregnancy represented hope for both their peoples and proof that the universe intended humans and Zellarians to work together. Her skin patterns blazed with brilliant colors as she declared that their child would be the first of a new generation that could bridge the gap between species. The reaction was immediate and dramatic as crew members from both ships struggled to process the impossible news. Dr. Amy Chun stood up to confirm the medical findings while engineer Sam Rodriguez explained that the energy readings he had been tracking now made perfect sense as indicators of successful biological bonding between different species. General Vex Thorn's face showed shock and anger as he demanded that Princess Lyra return to Zellarian space immediately for proper medical care and consultation with their own scientists. He declared that the pregnancy was either impossible or dangerous and that Lyra's duty to her people required her to seek treatment from Zellarian physicians. Admiral Kate Sullivan's voice crackled over the communication system as she ordered Jake to report immediately to Earth Command for medical examination and possible court-martial proceedings for violating first contact protocols. She declared that the situation had moved beyond diplomatic relations into uncharted territory that required immediate intervention from higher authorities. Jake stood up beside Lyra and announced that he would support whatever decision she made about the pregnancy and their future together. He declared that their child represented hope rather than danger and that both species should celebrate this proof that different peoples could create new life together. Lyra placed her hand on her stomach where their child was growing and announced that she would not return to Zellarian space until the baby was born safely. She declared that her child deserved to grow up knowing both human and Zellarian cultures and that she trusted Dr. Amy Chun Medical care more than the outdated treatments her own people would provide as the meeting dissolved into arguments and urgent communications with both home governments. Jake realized that their lives had just become infinitely more complicated but also more meaningful than anything he had ever imagined possible. News of Princess Lyra pregnancy spread through both human and Zalarian space like wildfire, creating political chaos that threatened to tear apart the fragile diplomatic relationship between the species. Earth government found itself divided between those who saw the pregnancy as a dangerous violation of first contact protocols and others who recognized the incredible scientific opportunity that Jake and Lyra Child represented for both civilizations. President Linda Walsh called emergency sessions of the Global Council while scientists and military leaders argued about the implications of cross-species reproduction that should have been impossible according to all known biological laws. Some council members demanded Jake immediate return to Earth for court-martial proceedings, while others pushed for increased support to study this unprecedented development. The Zalarian High Council reaction was even more dramatic as they declared Princess Lyra contaminated by alien influence and threatened to remove her from the line of succession unless she returned home immediately for purification treatments. General Vex Thorne sent increasingly urgent messages demanding that Lyra abandon the pregnancy and submit to Zalarian medical procedures that would eliminate what he called genetic corruption. However, a growing faction of younger Zalarians led by scientist Kira Velmoth began arguing that Lyra pregnancy might be exactly what their dying race needed to survive. They pointed to the successful cross-species conception as proof that humans possessed the genetic diversity necessary to restore Zalarian reproductive capabilities and save their civilization from extinction. Dr. Amy Chun research team worked around the clock to understand the biological mechanics of the impossible pregnancy while trying to ignore the political pressure from both governments. Her latest findings suggested that humans and Zalarians shared genetic markers that indicated a common ancestor from millions of years ago, which might explain their unexpected biological compatibility. The discovery of ancient genetic connections raised new questions about the origins of both species and challenged everything they thought they knew about their evolutionary history. Communications Officer Ryan Blake found references in old Earth databases to legends about star people who had visited ancient civilizations, which some scientists now speculated might be genetic memories of previous Zalarian contact. Jake faced the most difficult period of his career as Admiral Kate Sullivan threatened to relieve him of command, while Earth Command demanded detailed reports about every aspect of his relationship with Princess Lyra. He refused to cooperate with investigations that he felt violated both his privacy and diplomatic immunity while maintaining that his actions had been within acceptable first contact guidelines. Lyra stood firmly beside Jake despite increasing pressure from her own people as General Vex Thorne arrived with a Zalarian fleet demanding her immediate return to home space. She declared that her child represented the future of both species and refused to subject the baby to experimental treatments that might harm the first successful hybrid. In galactic history, engineer Sam Rodriguez made another breakthrough when he discovered that the energy readings between Jake and Lyra had stabilized into patterns that matched theoretical models of Zalarian soul resonance that he found in their cultural databases. His findings suggested that humans possessed a natural ability to achieve the deep bonding that Zalarians needed for successful reproduction. The situation became critical when extremist groups from both species began calling for violent action against what they saw as an abomination that threatened the purity of their respective races. Human purists demanded the pregnancy be terminated, while Zalarian traditionalists declared that Lyra had committed treason against her own species. Jake and Lyra found themselves confined to the Liberty as both governments restricted their movements. While deciding how to handle the unprecedented situation, they spent their time preparing for parenthood while Dr. Amy Chun monitored the pregnancy and reported that both mother and child appeared healthy despite the genetic impossibility of their existence. The first attack came from a rogue human vessel that attempted to board the Liberty with the stated intention of terminating the pregnancy and arresting Jake for treason. The assault was repelled by combined human and Zalarian forces as crews from both ships worked together to protect the expecting parents and the historic child. They carried General Vexthorn faced a similar challenge when Zalarian extremists demanded he take Princess Lyra by force and return her to home space for immediate medical intervention. His refusal to harm Lyra or her child created the first crack in Zalarian military unity as younger officers began questioning the wisdom of their leaders. Dr. Amy Chen announced that her research had uncovered evidence that the genetic compatibility between humans and Zalarians was not accidental but the result of deliberate manipulation by an unknown third species millions of years ago. She theorized that some advanced civilization had modified both human and Zalarian ancestors to ensure future compatibility for reasons that remained mysterious. The revelation that both species might be part of some ancient plan created new alliances. As scientists from both civilizations demanded access to Amy research and the opportunity to study Jake and Lyra child as a key to unlocking their shared genetic heritage, religious leaders from both species began interpreting the pregnancy as divine intervention intended to bring their peoples together. Jake received support from unexpected sources as several Earth military commanders declared that his actions had opened possibilities for peaceful cooperation that could benefit all humanity. They argued that punishing Jake would send the wrong message about Earth commitment to building positive relationships with alien species. Similarly, Lyra gained support from Zalarian civilians who saw her pregnancy as hope for their species' survival. After generations of declining birth rates and genetic stagnation, protests erupted across Zalarian space demanding that the High Council support their princes rather than condemn her for potentially saving their civilization. The political crisis reached its peak when both Earth Command and the Zalarian High Council demanded that Jake and Lyra separate immediately and submit to government control of their child future. The couple refused and declared their intention to raise their child as a bridge between species regardless of political consequences. Ryan Blake intercepted communications indicating that both governments were planning military action to forcibly separate the couple and gain control of the child for their respective research programs. He warned Jake and Lyra that they had only hours before armed forces from both species would arrive to enforce government orders. Jake made the decision that would define the rest of his life when he announced that he and Lyra would seek asylum on a neutral world where their child could be born free from government interference. He declared that their baby belonged to both species and to neither and deserved the chance to grow up without being treated as a political or scientific experiment. Lyra supported Jake's decision and announced that she was formally renouncing her claim to the Zalarian throne in order to protect her child from being used as a pawn in political games. She declared that love was more important than royal duty and that their child's future was worth any personal sacrifice. As military ships from both governments approached the Liberty, Jake and Lyra prepared to leave everything they had known behind to protect the child who represented hope for a better future between their peoples. They knew that their decision would make them outcasts from both civilizations, but they also knew that some things were worth fighting for regardless of the cost. Dr. Amy Chun volunteered to accompany them as their personal physician while engineer Sam Rodriguez and communications officer Ryan Blake declared their intention to help establish the first independent human Zalarian colony. They recognized that they were witnessing history in the making and wanted to be part of building something better than the fear and prejudice that had driven both governments to threaten innocent child. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine whether love and hope could triumph over political fear and whether two species could overcome their differences to create something greater than either could achieve alone. The birth of Elena Keth Morrison on the neutral world of Haven Colony became the most watched event in galactic history as billions of beings from both species waited to see if the impossible child would survive, and what her existence might mean for the future of interstellar relations. Dr. Amy Chun served as the primary physician while Zalarian medical specialist Kira Velmoth provided expertise on hybrid physiology that proved crucial during the complicated delivery. Jake held Lyra's hand as their daughter entered the world with a cry that seemed to contain harmonics from both human vocal cords and Zellerian resonance chambers, creating a sound that no being in the galaxy had ever heard before. Elena's skin showed the faint luminescent patterns of her Zellerian heritage, while her facial features clearly displayed her human ancestry, making her a living symbol of successful cooperation between different species. The healthy baby girl displayed remarkable abilities from her first moments of life, as she seemed to respond to emotions from both parents in ways that suggested enhanced empathic sensitivity beyond anything seen in pure Zellerians. When Jake spoke to her in English, she turned toward his voice, while Lyra's Zellerian lullabies caused Elena's skin patterns to pulse gently in rhythm with the music. News of Elena's successful birth triggered celebrations across Zellerian space as the dying race saw hope for the first time in generations. Scientist Kira Velmoth announced that the hybrid child proved beyond doubt that humans possessed the genetic diversity needed to restore Zellerian reproduction and save their civilization from extinction on Earth. President Linda Walsh faced intense pressure from both supporters and opponents of the hybrid birth as humanity struggled to understand the implications of their species' potential to interbreed with aliens. She made the historic decision to create the Department of Interspecies Relations with Dr. Amy Chun as its first director, recognizing that Elena birth had changed everything about humanity's place in the galaxy. The Zellerian High Council found themselves forced to reconsider their isolationist policies as public opinion swung heavily in favor of Princess Lyra and her miracle child. The younger generation of Zellerians demanded that their leaders embrace cooperation with humans rather than clinging to outdated concepts of genetic purity that had brought their species to the brink of extinction. Jake and Lyra established the first human Zellerian colony on Haven with support from progressive leaders of both species who recognized that Elena represented the beginning of a new era in galactic civilization. Engineer Sam Rodriguez became the colony chief technology officer, developing hybrid technologies that combined human innovation with Zellerian energy manipulation capabilities. The colony attracted scientists, researchers, and families from both species who wanted to be part of building something unprecedented in galactic history. Children began growing up together, learning both languages and customs while developing the kind of deep cross-species friendships that their parents had thought impossible. Elena growth and development fascinated researchers from both civilizations, as she displayed abilities that neither species possessed individually. She could communicate complex emotions without words, using a combination of human facial expressions and Zellerian skin patterns that created a new form of universal empathy. As Elena learned to speak, her first words came simultaneously in both English and Zellerian harmonic tones, creating sounds that seemed to bypass normal language barriers and communicate meaning directly to anyone who heard them. Scientists theorized that she represented an evolutionary leap that could lead to true galactic communication. The political landscape continued to evolve as moderate leaders from both species recognized that cooperation offered benefits that isolation could never provide. Trade agreements and joint research projects began flourishing, while extremist groups found themselves increasingly marginalized by public opinion that favored unity over division. Elena's first birthday celebration became a galactic holiday as Haven Colony hosted representatives from dozens of worlds who came to witness the child who had changed everything. She toddled between human and Zellerian guests, showing no preference for either species and treating all adults as potential friends and protectors. Jake watched his daughter play with children from both species and marveled at how easily they communicated despite their different origins. The youngsters had developed their own hybrid games and songs that incorporated elements from both cultures while creating something entirely new and beautiful. Dr. Amy Chun research into Elena development revealed that the child brain structure showed characteristics of both species while displaying new neural pathways that neither humans nor Zellerians possessed. She theorized that hybrid children might represent the next stage of evolution for both civilizations. The breakthrough in understanding came when Elena began displaying the ability to facilitate communication between humans and Zellerians who had never learned each other's languages. Her presence seemed to create a field of empathic resonance that allowed beings from different species to understand each other. Emotional intentions, if not their exact words. Communications Officer Ryan Blake documented dozens of cases where Elena's ability to bridge species barriers had resolved conflicts and misunderstandings that might otherwise have escalated into serious diplomatic incidents. The child seemed to instinctively understand how to help different beings connect with each other. Princess Lyra, now simply known as Lyra Morrison, adapted to life as a colony leader and mother with the same intelligence and dedication she had shown as Zalarian royalty. She worked tirelessly to build institutions that respected both cultures while creating space for the hybrid civilization that was emerging. The establishment of the Galactic Cooperation Council represented the formal recognition that Elena Birth had fundamentally changed interstellar politics, as both species committed to working together rather than maintaining the isolation that had nearly destroyed Zalarian civilization. Jake accepted appointment as the Council's first human representative, while Lyra served as Zalarian ambassador. Elena's second birthday brought news that several other human Zalarian couples had successfully conceived children, proving that Jake and Lyra's love story was not unique, but rather the beginning of a new chapter in galactic evolution. The hybrid children showed similar abilities to communicate across species, barriers suggesting that this was a permanent change rather than a single miraculous event. As Elena grew into a bright, curious toddler who spoke both languages fluently and instinctively understood the emotions of everyone around her, Jake reflected on how love had conquered seemingly impossible barriers. The little girl, who played equally happily with human and Zalarian toys, represented proof that cooperation and understanding could overcome any obstacle. The future looked brighter than either species had dared hope, as colony ships filled with mixed families began establishing settlements throughout neutral space. Elena and her fellow hybrid children would grow up in a galaxy where species differences were celebrated rather than feared, and where love truly had no boundaries. Jake held his daughter as she babbled happily in her unique mixture of human words and Zalarian harmonics, while Lyra's skin patterns glowed with contentment that filled their home with warm light. They had created not just a child, but a new hope for galactic civilization that would echo through the stars for generations to come. The story that began with impossible love between beings from different worlds had become the foundation myth for a new era of interstellar cooperation. Elena's first sentence, spoken clearly in both languages simultaneously, was simply "Love makes everything possible," and those words became the motto for a galaxy where differences were no longer barriers, but bridges to understanding.